This video is dedicated to the one guy who cooked and seethed on my Pirate Snake video. For some reason, he ended it with, "Of course you're a Vizzy Pop enjoyer." Whatever the hell that means. This video's for you, bud. So I recorded the footage a month ago and forgot to actually make, a video. So here we are. Hazbin Redesigns. There's many people who redesign these characters, usually in their own style, with their own preferences. However, I typically try to replicate the art style. I envision it more as a, what if I was the character designer for the show? Speaking of character design, I'm available for commissions. Just hit me up. I've attempted to redesign the main cast before, however I wasn't particularly happy with how it came out, mostly with their hard-to-read silhouettes, or how I didn't follow Madrano's signature line of action. And this is a me thing, I like keeping my character design simple when I can, especially if it's for frame-by-frame animation like this. Generally, I don't know why her work isn't using rigs. Yeah, Adobe sucks, but do you know how friendly Toon Boom is? Rigged animation is designed specifically for this, especially on a tight budget that Amazon no doubt has. But I digress, let's get into it. I mentioned last time that Madrano isn't good at depicting racial features, but she really isn't good at depicting anything specific that doesn't already fit her Hot Topic Sparkle Dog mode. More often than not, she'll have 17 different themes for a single character, but they'll always come out as a Tumblr Sexy Man version of Jonan Vasquez art. So when she wants to include design elements from something, it'll almost be like a vague allusion to it. Like, Mimsy is meant to resemble a chicken. But unless you were told that, you would never get it. Beelzebub is meant to be an animal tamer in a circus. Did you get that at all? Beelzebub is like a Sonic character designer. No, this is a kidnap, trust me bro. So the goal was to keep in line with the design ethos, but have the theme be more direct and less scattered. The first design I did for the video was Vaggie. I actually worked on the sketch before I started recording, and I ended up really liking it. So I basically just used that while changing a few things around. I wanted to lean more into the moth aesthetic that she has going on. When Madrano adds animal elements to her character design, and they're not like a dog or a cat, typically those elements will just be strictly for fashion, or maybe a bit more on the proportions, or how the autonomy is built, rather than anything that's more overt. For instance, Vaggie's proportions are a bit more stick-like compared to her counterparts, and also the stripes on her outfit were similar to that of Moth's stripes. So I get what they're going for, but I don't know if it necessarily worked out, mostly because people have to be continuously told what it is. Now, when I went to go look for moth references and everything, I came across the gray dagger moth, and I thought, oh my god, that's perfect for her. So of course I changed the spear she had to a dagger in the sketch. Another thing I noticed with moths compared to other insects and everything is that they look a little chubby, mostly because of how fluffy they are. So keeping with that, Vaggie was designed to be a little bit wider. I like the idea of the wings being part of the outfit that you see with Valentino, so I basically just yoinked that and put it here. However, I did have to keep the hotel staff uniform that she has going on, so I changed it to a vest. The wings themselves were a lot of fun to design. Valentino himself has a heart theme, and I figured, okay, Vaggie should have an eye theme. Sort of like how moths and butterflies in real life also have eye patterns on their wings to scare off predators. I think this works well for the more protective attitude that Vaggie has. The eyes are also inside the wings, well A, to make it look creepy, but also B, because I think that also works thematically with her backstory of being thrown out of heaven. Sort of like heaven is still keeping an eye on her. Not much else to talk about with Vaggie, just that I think she's one of my favorite designs in the lineup. Now, on to Charlie, the Disney Princess of Hell. And once Disney inevitably buys out Amazon in a truly terrifying example of unregulated capitalism, that will be a mildly funny joke. In the early sketch, I was tempted to give her goat eyes and ears, however I decided against it due to lack of readability. I also wanted to do suspenders and a bow tie, as that dorky look fits for her, but they didn't really fit her status as a hotel manager. When I went back to do a follow-up sketch, I tried to give her a more femme look with a skirt, along with having her hair be let down. I want to do this tuxedo dress outfit I see sometimes, and I think it looks really neat. But again, the silhouette was cluttered, and I figured the sadder legs she had would be difficult to account for with a skirt. While I liked Charlie's little hair flip in the original design, I felt like I had to get rid of it to account for the horns. Now I love the puppet motif in general, so it pains me to not make that theme more prominent. However, I don't think it fits her character all that much, unless the show is implying she's being puppeted around by other people, which I guess is true. But even then, the theme is very muted, only really showing up in her cheeks. I also want to include more devil imp elements that show up on occasion, so the horns and tail are now a permanent fixture. I also got rid of the big braid thing she had before. I don't really know why she has that. I figured it would be more fun to animate fiery hair instead. If you're wondering why all the sketches were made first, it's due to needing to make sure the heights and proportions were consistent throughout. If you design a cast of some kind, you do this for this exact reason. When drawn individually, proportions can really clash against each other. A thing I do for these redesigns and character designs in general is to have a list of attributes of the characters to the side. This way I can narrow down on certain elements I want to be prominent. Next up is Alistair, everyone's favorite sexy man, where Vor is on the table. So originally I wanted to lean more into the voodoo theme he had, however after learning it was a closed practice, I decided to stray away from that. So I do what I usually do, I go on the wiki and try to find out what other inspirations the character had. For Alistair, there's obviously the radio theme, but there's not much you can do with that outside of his staff. After all,
this face was made for radio.
As you can see in the initial sketch, Alistair was going to be more orange. In the coloring, he was leaning towards brown. This was to lean into his hunter background and his vintage aesthetic, but the show loves using neon and vibrant colors, so it just wouldn't work. The orange was also switched over to Husk, due to his flashback showing him wearing it, and I thought it looked better. So I changed Alistair's coloring to purple as I felt it was appropriate for his more mysterious characterization. Ooh! Also, I felt there were too many bow ties in the show, so I gave him a tie. This was also to make his face and chest area less cluttered. Since the face is the most expressive part of the body, keeping that clear and readable is very important to animation. The other inspirations were deer, stitches, and the 30s. Earlier model sheets of him had stitches in the design. I get why they removed that, but I decided it was best to just axe the pinstripes instead. The stitches would be considerably easier to draw and animate compared to that. One part I had a lot of fun with was his hair and deer skull. A lot of times people use hair as a distinguishing feature for character designs, but whenever they use straight or wavy hair, it looks a bit odd. Making distinct shapes out of coily hair is considerably easier. Since Alistair is already Kirill, giving him kinky hair to shape into deer ears made more sense to me. I also want to make his antlers more prominent, as it's kind of hard to see the deer theme. Now initially he looked more like his canon design, but I felt that wasn't something that I'd make for his kind of character, and I wasn't satisfied with the initial sketch, so I went back to earlier redesigns I did for him. I found that I gave him a deer skull mask, and I decided that make him look creepier or cooler as a result. Very briefly, I flirted with the idea of Alistair in suspenders to make his tail more prominent, but it made his chest too busy. The proportions are cartoony with big heads and tiny bodies, so having details that go down the body is difficult to work with. Patterns in general are difficult to animate, but it'd be especially hard here. Angel Dust, I had so much difficulty with. Initially I wanted to give him all 8 limbs and wanted to try Molly's legs, but it just looked like it repeated itself, so 6 limbs it is. For this outfit, I tried to think of what the Mafia and a sex worker would both wear. Oddly enough, trench coats. The width of the trench coat was a tad more difficult to figure out. Initially I wanted to flare out the bottom so it looks closer to a spider's abdomen. Maybe also have a web design near the bottom, but I felt it direct attention to his crotch, which I guess he would like, but doesn't work for animation. Was tempted to give him spider mandibles, but figured it'd be too hard to animate. I missed the short gloves that stuck out in the pilot. I kept removing that because the stripes would be on his sleeves, and that's more difficult to animate, so it'd just be easier to cover it with long gloves. But I was determined to keep it, so I just gave him flared out sleeves to the top set of arms, then gave him the flared out gloves the second set. I yoinked the little web bow tie from his brother Arachnus, but since Charlie and Husk already had bow ties, I didn't want to have another one. So I just let him keep the collar he had instead. I tried to add spider elements wherever I could, but it always looked distracting. Instead, I just gave him a little spider earring, based on a symbol from one of his earlier designs. I also gave him webbing on his suit lapels. The colors were easy, just reuse the colors from his original design and you're good. Pink, reds, and whites made the most sense for his character. Angel was one of the most difficult to work with, but he ended up being my favorite design of the bunch. Guess it all paid off in the end. Nifty was probably the easiest to do here, just going more into the bug and housewife theme she had. Her being a bug was likely something that came after her appearance is already set in stone. So she has extra limbs, and all of it are used for housework. I also gave her little antennas and kept the mandibles this time. While she was the easiest for the sketch, she was very difficult for the colors. Originally I went for normal colors, but felt too samey. Then I figured, okay, insects have blue blood, and I went with the blue and white color scheme, and then I fucking found out that no, it's goddamn sea creatures that have blue blood, so I did this for nothing! Now she just looks like an ice monster. I'm skimming over this, but trust me, it took a stupidly long time to do. And all of that for nothing, as I went back to original colors anyway. I did keep the eye blue and purple though. Next we have Husk! On the trend of decluttering, I stuck to the idea of simplifying his wings, both in construction and patterns. So the card symbols from the pilot and the circles and strides from the show are both cut. The wings themselves are constructed to be rather generic. And finally, the weird tail thing was changed to be a normal cat tail. However, I did still want to keep the card motif, so I added a little spade to his top hat. Was tempted to give the vest double-breasted heart buttons, but again, it was too busy. Take a shot every time I say something about designs being too busy if you want alcohol poisoning. The outfit itself was going for those puffy sleeves you see with old-timey card dealers and bartenders. Originally I was going to stick to his sleek body type for the show, but then I came across redesigns that made him overweight. Since he had a backstory of being a gambling overlord, I figured it would be fitting to have him be a literal fat cat. I struggled to find unintrusive ways to add the diamonds and clubs, but eventually settling on diamonds in the ears and clubs as sleeve buttons, wherever the hell those things are called. And I thought I was done, but upon re-examination, I realized I did not like the wings. I don't even get why he has them, because it just causes people to think he's a bat. So the wings were tossed, but I realized his face was too dark against his white sleeves, so I brought back the white muzzle that was in the initial design. I also had to go back and lighten up all the character designs due to the darker muted color scheme not fitting in the show. Overall, the designs are pretty neat. Thanks for watching. If you have any other ideas for the next redesigns I do, let me know in the comments. One other video I have in mind is to redesign Equestria Girls. I've technically had the footage and designs for like a year, but just never got around to it. If this goes well, you'll see it soon. I thought it'd be funny to have him be a literal fat cat. I thought it would be fitting to have him be a literal fat cat. Pumpkin! Sorry, I gotta go take care of my fat cat. Nifty was probably the easiest to do here. I just lean into... I say lean into so fucking much in this goddamn script. Why did no one stop me?